Three things today: fire watch, a thief, and tree pruners. When I was in scouting, we would often take our camping trips during the winter months, and we wouldn't stay in tents. We would stay inside where there was a fireplace. During the night, you had to keep the fire going, so each person would be assigned a fire watch shift for 1 hour. Your job is, while everyone else is asleep, to sit in front of the fire and to make sure it doesn't go out and to make sure it doesn't go out of control. You had to keep putting wood in and to make sure that you did not fall asleep either. So the rest of us, we were instructed that if you happened to be in your bed and you noticed that the guy who's on fire watch, his head starts bobbing up and down, you were to grab the nearest shoe and chuck it at him. Stay awake, Jesus says, for you do not know on which day your Lord will come. Seems to be the readings or the common thread that's going through all of the readings for today. These readings are meant to rouse us from our sleep. They're meant to keep us on standby. They're meant to get us up, moving, and dressed and ready for action. This time of year, though, I'm asking the question, aren't we already awake and moving and active? We're used to being busy because we've just spent a lot of energy at Thanksgiving time. We are transitioning right into that season where the whole world is celebrating Christmas seemingly without a break. Surely we're busy and active. How are we asleep? Well, the key to understanding this is that Jesus is not talking about being physically asleep. It's about being spiritually asleep. There's lots of activity in the world around us, but in reality, we're spiritually dormant. The works of darkness that Paul points out in the second reading today, drunkenness, sexual sin, rivalry, bitterness, those things are not oriented toward the light. They're just simply fruits of darkness. It doesn't expect God to arrive at all, which is why, just like in the days of Noah, when everyone was going about their business, totally unexpectant of the coming flood, today it might be a second flood that comes for us. I'm making that. That was meant to be a joke. You were supposed to laugh at that. Anyway, the temptation for you and me is to do the same, and it's to doze off, to get drowsy into the godless busyness of the world around us. You get the idea. So the theme today is to stay awake. But what are we staying awake for? What's the purpose of keeping ourselves spiritually vigilant? Well, the word Advent means a coming or an arrival. And so in Advent, we're expecting a coming of somebody, and that's Jesus. Not once, though, but twice. The first coming of Jesus happened in the past over 2,000 years ago, and that's the obvious one. It's the one we're going to celebrate in just 4 weeks exactly. The second arrival of Jesus is not so obvious because it hasn't occurred yet. It's the one that's going to happen when the Lord comes in judgment, either at the end of the world or at the end of your life, whichever one comes first. The Lord says, stay awake and be ready, not for Christmas, but be ready for that day when the Lord might come. We're now rounding out the month of November. For those of you who know, the month of November is when we remember traditionally all the dead. The beginning of this month, we read off all the names of the people from our parish who used to sit in these pews, but have since gone to the Lord within the last year. Many of them, their passing was relatively gradual and expected. For others, though, the Lord came like a thief in the night, suddenly and unexpectedly. Ideally, they were all spiritually vigilant and ready for that coming of the Lord. Ideally, you and I too would be vigilant and ready for that day, because the Lord could come like a thief in the night for you and me too. Now, lest we think that the only moment that we need to be ready for in life is at the end of our life, That's not the case. There are lots of moments every day when the Lord comes and pays a visit. And they're the most unexpected times. Think of the person who is difficult to be around and they come up to you and your first instinct is to lash out at them. Think of the moments when you should be doing something important, but instead you're drawn to scroll through social media or mindlessly watch TV. Think about all of the temptations that you and I are faced with on an everyday basis that could potentially smother the image of God that's within us. Those are the moments when the Lord pays a visit. That's when Jesus appears. Will he find us spiritually awake and ready for him, or is he going to find us dulled and intoxicated and drowsy by the passions that we have and all the cares around us that the world gives? That's the question. Since we started on the subject of firewood, I thought I would give another image that was presented to us in the first reading from Isaiah. He says, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks." They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Swords and spears point outward. They're used for battle. They're meant to do damage to other people. But pruning hooks and plowshares curve inward towards you. They're meant now to do work on you. And the whole message of Advent is that we take those sharp tools that we use to commit violence against other people through our malicious thoughts, our jealousy, envy, bitterness, rivalry, our biting words. And we take those sharp objects and we turn them inward to now do work on us so that we can prepare ourselves for the coming of Jesus. Now we say, it is I who have to be pruned, not other people. It's the soil of my heart that has to be tilled rather than lashing out at others. Each year when I was a child, we used to get the Christmas tree from our own field. My father had planted a lot of trees, and for a while they were just the right size to fit in our living room. However, as the years went on, the trees didn't get any smaller, they got bigger. And so we were left with these trees that in no way could fit inside a living room. So what we had to do was pull out the saw, cut off a few feet from the bottom, trim off those branches that were sticking out. And so now it looked like a big Christmas bush. But little by little, my father would carefully prune down this bush to make it resemble somewhat a tree. So if we put so much effort into pruning the trees that we're going to be using at Christmas, then how much more effort we need to put into pruning our own souls, the things that we don't need. Why not put as much effort into the interior life as we put into the exterior life? When you prune, you're getting rid of all of those unnecessary things that pull you away from the Lord and that keep you from being reminded that the Lord is in charge of your life. Now, this doesn't mean that we stop living our normal life, because in the words of St. Paul, you still eat and drink, but not to carousing and drunkenness. You still live with your passions, but not to sexual excess and lust. You still conduct your family and work life, but not with quarreling and jealousy. When you and I expect God and are ready for him in every moment, then all those works of darkness and sleepiness, now those are regulated and put under control. Consistent Christians watch and are alert. Inconsistent Christians do not. Which ones are we going to be? Let's take these next 4 weeks of Advent and be consistent. Let's be vigilant. Let's be watchful every day for that coming of the Lord.